From I Am Interchange, this is the Hatch podcast series.
It seems now more than ever that we have found ourselves on the cusp of monumental worldwide change. Whether we consider the environment, politics, infrastructure, health, economics, or inequities across a broad swath of social constructs, the consensus is clear and urgent. All is not as it should be. The United Nations, a consortium of 193 member states from around the globe, agrees. In 2015, the UN unanimously adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These goals call for urgent action in global partnership to secure peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. In alignment with these goals, HATCH, a curated network of innovators, artists, activists, and entrepreneurs working together to accelerate positive global change, focuses the annual Summit Impact Labs on topics related to their 4 impact pillars: equity, education, environment, and empowerment. This series will explore those on the front lines of transformational systems change, accelerating solutions for these human challenges, uniting to hatch a better world for all.
I'm Tate Chamberlin, and in this podcast, I'm joined by Olympian rugby player, facilitator, and community organizer Pamphinette Buisa, and HATCH NextGen activists and students Olivia, Bulis, and Jenni, in reflections on diversity, decolonization, systems change, and why empowering youth may be the first step towards a brighter future for all. To learn more about HATCH and the HATCH NextGen Youth Program, go to hatchexperience.org. You can apply or nominate a NextGen youth for HATCH. Enjoy the podcast. My name is Tate Chamberlin, and you're listening to the I Am Interchange Hatch podcast series. And we're up at the Hatch Experience in Paradise Valley, Montana. There are 7 projects that are aligned with UN Sustainable Development Goals that are going through some accelerator systems change labs. And we're here with some really great minds. We've got some HATCH NextGen and a former Olympian in the house. Really excited. This just sort of emerged, and so we're going to roll with it. So we've got Jenni, Olivia, Bulis, and Pamphinette Buisa. Olivia, is there a book that you'd recommend that's blown your mind recently?
I have the best English teacher ever. Well, you know, when I started her class, I was like, this woman has no plan. Like, she just lets it happen. But, like, her plan is to not have a plan. And so we just talk all class about different pieces of literature. But my favorite book is If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. And I really got into his work because last year our class was reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I was like, I don't want to read this book. Like, it's about a mental hospital. I was like, I've had enough of a 2020. So I read James Baldwin instead with my teacher, Notes of a Native Son, and it's his commentary. It's essays pulled together that are a commentary on race relations within America and in Europe. And I was really struck by his writing, and so I started looking into his other work. But If Beale Street Could Talk is, I believe, I'm reading all of his books, but it's the only book that he wrote that solely focuses on a story of Black love from a female perspective in the relationship, and it also examines racism within the justice system. It's the most beautiful book I've ever read. There's a lot of universality to it, but it also invites us to really reflect, or at least for me as a white female identifying person, to reflect.
Ruby?
Well, mine's not nearly so eloquently described, but the first one I thought of, and I read it recently at the beginning of the summer, is A Chronicle of a Death Foretold, which is by the Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who's the same author as 100 Years of Solitude, so very famous Latin American author. I had never read any of his other works, and it's a very short book. I'd say probably like 60 pages. But I loved the writing of it so much, and it's known for its magical realism. So the way that it describes events, and the narrator, who's one of the characters in the books, it's the narrator has gone back to the town he grew up in and tried to figure out how events led up to a murder, and when everyone knew about the murder, and yet somehow it still happened. And it's a great book because I think it deals with the narrator who he at least sounds very sure in the events that he's describing, even if he's saying that they're not clear what happened. And yet you get to the end of the book and you're just wondering how much of it is true. And it is very, metaphorical, and there's a lot of, motifs of family and social expectation, and how all of those elements led up to a very violent crime. And then the whole time you're like, oh my gosh, such beautiful writing, and it's dream interpretation, and it's what's really going on. And it's great. And it deals a lot with, gender relations and stuff like that as well. So I loved that book. It's good.
How about you, Pamphinette?
Honestly, being in school, like university, it's like reading a book. I'm just kind of like, But
I hear that.
Right?
You're in school and like there's so much other stuff
there's
going
so
on.
much. But I would say, what I always recommend to people is decolonization is not a metaphor. And what I appreciate about it is that I learn something new every single time. I think with like the collective that I'm with is decolonization. Decolonize together is like you're constantly learning, and being able to read something and then read it again and still find new gems every single time as to like, whenever we think about these big concepts, we leave them at concepts. But then when it's like, actually, it's not a metaphor. This stuff can be integrated into literally every single facet of life. That brings up that idea of when we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, if we just include people, great. But if we don't address the root thing of like, if we have a decolonial lens, it's already ingrained, that accessibility piece, having LGBTQ plus people, having, different abilities of disability, things like that. And I think relearning every single time I read it.
It's like an onion.
Yeah.
Every time you read it, it just like peels back a layer.
Literally. Yeah.
Will you tell me a little bit about what each of you are like kind of working on right now?
I am a student in high school. I teach sex ed, so unbiased, medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, culturally sensitive, and inclusive sexual education and healthy relationships, so domestic violence prevention in school districts all across Montana. Our legislature has made it so that sex ed is not something that everyone has access to, or medically accurate sex ed isn't something that everyone has access to. And I think being able to go into schools and have conversations with people my age, like what does consent look like in this world where consent, there feels like there's a lot of nuance behind it. So I do that. I just finished running a campaign for something.
A campaign for what?
What is it?
It was...
Tell us more.
Yeah, it was to get cities to adopt the UN Bill of Rights for Women and Girls.
Cool. So goal number 5. Bill of Rights underneath that.
Yes.
That are included.
And it was under the Cities for CEDAW, so it's the Commission to End Discrimination Against Women and Girls that's held by the UN. That was an interesting experience. I think taught me a lot about where my values are in a workspace and what it feels like to sometimes not be heard. I read. I'm trying to be a teenager a little bit because I feel like I've wasted my teenage years of working. Yeah, I am trying to take care of myself in a world that tells me not to, and just learning every single day. I think it's such a gift, and I've really found a lot of gratitude for it, especially being out of school for a year and a half of what normal school has felt like. So
I am a dancer, and I've been dancing my whole life. And right now, like I said, I'm a senior in high school. I'm 17, so as soon as I get back this weekend, I'm working on college applications, and I'm going back to school, and I'm going back to dance. I have rehearsal on Sunday when I drive back. I'm a choreographer as well, so I'm working on a couple different choreographic works, and I think when asked to describe what I want to do artistically I was writing my artistic statement, and I had no idea where to start. I came up with 2 pretty clear goals for myself that I'm kind of thinking about now and I'm working on, and that's one is I want to create pieces that impact and reflect the whole world and that can be meaningful in today's society and that can be applied to many different situations globally, but social justice and for all of those movements that I care so much about. And in addition to that, I want to make pieces that kind of honor my teachers and all of the work they've received from their teachers and all of the work that I have been able to receive from them. So I described it as I want to make cool art for the world, and then I want to make cool art for the nerds who know enough to know that it's cool. So like technically and choreographically, I want to make stuff for the dance nerds as well as for the world to make impact. So I'm thinking about that now, but just kind of starting on that journey and starting, a video portfolio.
Your piece last night was so good.
Thank you. I love performing that one. It's the only piece I've made that had people reacting in such a really loud way to me. But I love performing that one because, I would fall to the floor in one of the particular moments. And you would hear people in the audience and they'd go, or they'd go, ah. And my dad told a story of I performed it. The first time I was performing it, it was part of a week-long competition and diplomacy conference and cultural exchange. So I performed it again at the end of the week, and he was sitting in front of a woman, and he heard her lean over to her friend and go, I don't like that piece. And I think that's a big piece of art.
Will you talk a little bit about the content of it?
Yeah. I made a piece inspired by what I was observing during the protesting and the movements for gun control after the last school shooting in Florida. So it was, and I choreographed it almost a year later, but those were the emotions I was channeling. And there's lyrics in the music I use called "The Kids Are Coming." So the attitude I took towards it was really, all I can do is tell our own story of what we experienced. So I don't want to make it, I wouldn't say it's a political stance on anything. I would say that it's telling a story that's true for a lot of kids, and it's true. While choreographing it, I would always think back to this one interview I saw of a girl who went to the school, and she was asked afterwards if she was surprised that they had a shooting at their school, and she said no. She said that she was waiting for it. If it happened at other places, why wouldn't it happen here? I took that idea to heart with it, because it really is. We tell this story and we tell it again, and it happens again and again and again and again, and nothing's done about it. So at the end, I point at the audience in a pretty accusatory way, but I think that's my artistic way of saying it's on you guys. And I was originally doing this to an audience of adults in a state that is generally pro-guns and anti-gun control. So that was kind of the stance I took with that, but it's really just about the kids coming together with this joint fear of going to school in America, and then coming together saying, we will change this, but it's on you guys because you're the adults, and we're not supposed to be worried about dying in school. Yeah, so cool. Back to the original question. It's interesting. I'm having some conflicted feelings about going back to school because I love school and I am so grateful. I love learning and I really love my classes, but I've always had this, I struggle with the balance of my passions outside of school and in school. But I get to be on the education lab here at Hatch, which I've been so excited to be on.
Yeah, reimagining.
Yeah.
What am I working on? First and foremost, my vulnerability. I think that's the first thing I'm trying to work on. I think that for myself, playing sport, you're constantly having to put your best foot forward, and you're pretty much exposed. Like, if you drop the ball, the whole world's watching you. So if you mess up, and after reaching the Olympic level and then kind of stepping out, it's like, how do I feel when I make a mistake? So right now I'm kind of in the stage of working on my relationship to failure. And I think with that has propelled my love again. I'll bring it back to decolonization. It's just that sense of perfectionism that I need to be perfect, and that sense of elitism. I'm I want to be the best. I have to be the best. The best of the world are here. I need to beat the best. And I'm unpacking, why can I be okay with me being here? How do I support others be okay where they're at? You know that your voice is important and it matters when you come to any space, so that through that is a form of healing for me. So I'm working on my confidence, and also with that confidence is putting out partnerships and collabs and investing in myself. That means coin. I want to work with people and be hey, how can we decolonize arts and be resistant in what we're doing? How do we do this in consent and grounding in that, and kind of bringing that everywhere?
A lot of Hatch is about systems change, and we've all kind of riffed on it a little bit with pieces of activism that we've been talking about. What does systems change mean to you?
I think system change is thinking beyond borders. And when I say beyond borders, I think when we talk about community is questioning what are the borders of how we consider community. And I think that when we talk about system change, we were talking about earlier, is that like systems are composed of people. These people have energies. So how do we make sure that these energies are consolidated in one area and we're not losing energy? And the way that we waste, like we're talking about that human potential, then that's why we have these systemic issues. So system change would mean redefining how we understand community by pushing the borders of who's included and who isn't, and how do we get them in? And when that's the foundation of how we're moving and operating, we can then reimagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge component of systems change is also recognizing where we're at. And I think that when people in power recognize that there is an issue, I think sometimes there can be a lot of shame around it. And changing the system, you have to sit with that uncomfortability. And as Pamphinette said, the only way the system changes is if every single person is represented in the system. When we have a system that reflects the diversity of our world, racially, gender, with sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, political beliefs, then we're able to co-create systems that work for everyone because everyone's voices are in the room. We're in this interesting space right now where we have to make sure also that people are not feeling like tokens in order to make that system look complete. Like systems aren't complete ever. They're always growing, they're always changing, they're always evolving, but everyone needs to, at least I think that everyone needs to be seen, be heard, and people who have historically been in power need to step aside and listen to others that haven't. We like to talk a lot. I like to talk a lot. And I recognize that I have a lot of privilege and it's my turn to listen. Like that's the only way that the system changes is when we step aside and invite voices to the table that have the perspective and the experience that's needed to change this.
An idea we've been repeating, specifically in the education lab, but I think I've heard it multiple places, is one of the other participants here at Hatch, he said, reimagining community is what we're doing. They've been saying, now that I just said that, I think of Trevor Noah in his book. He talks about when he was a little kid, his mom had him read everything that she could get her hands on and he could get his hands on because he said that she taught him, I believe it was his mother who taught him this, that if you can't imagine it, you can't do it. So I think here we're talking a lot about, like Olivia said, acknowledging the gaps we have in representation, but also the gaps we have, I guess, true representation. So not having that token of like, oh yeah, we got everyone covered, right? Who's speaking? Who's on the mics? Who's, So yeah, I think changing systems, I think ultimately I am an optimist for the world. I think changing systems, it's inevitable that, especially now, I think it's inevitable that we're on the path to being more inclusive because I think once people step aside to be joined by the people who have been historically and currently left out of situations that are often extremely relevant to their situation, or it's their situation entirely and people have just occupied those spaces instead of them, I think once people step aside, once people step up, there's no going back. So every step we take where every gear that shifts in the system is shifting towards better functioning, more inclusive world.
To add also, like, if you feel like you're there, you're not, and you need to keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
It's a continued learning process. We really like to, like the American way of doing things is like, check the box. And like, you keep going down the line of tasks. And like that, I think, takes away from the understanding that like nothing is ever complete. Like systems are growing and evolving with an evolving world. And we need to understand that. We can't become stagnant. Like there is no stagnation in systems.
Yeah.
There's so many incredible people and they really have so many different backgrounds and so many different expertise. But you still notice in these discussions that people have blind spots. So what Olivia was saying about you're never you're never there in terms of learning, and we're talking about that in the education lab as well, lifelong learning, is there's never a stopping point to the evolution, and there's never a stopping point to what you can learn.
And that's what community is. That's what like system change is about, is having time, space, and ears.
Yeah.
When we do that, it's like literally change happens in like, 3-4 hours? Like, I don't even know how long that was, you know? Our ability to refine what our blind spots are is where greatness happens. Because like that idea of stagnation, that we're here and that this is a standard and we leave that there, that's not what human life is. We're consistently evolving. So we got to lean into, I don't know, okay, cool, let's vibe. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Do you think, is diversity good?
Yes. Yes. I mean, yes. I think that's like, sorry, kind of a stupid question. Like, if not everyone is in the room is missing something.
I don't know. It took me by surprise again. Is diversity good? I don't know. The first thing I thought of is like, it's not good or bad. It exists. We're diverse.
Yeah.
So regardless of whatever, adjectives we attach to it, diversity exists, and it's our job to reflect diversity, in policies in our worlds and our values, because it's not like it's going away. Diversity exists, so it's our job to hold the space for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think exactly that adding a sentiment to it, it's like, at the end of the day, like, I think different from you and you. So even if it's in a room of people who've grown up together, same thing, you will have a diverse experience and show up in a different way every single time. I can be diverse in the way I'm presenting myself. If I'm angry, I'm mad, in everything. So 100%, not that diversity is it good, but it's here.
Yeah, that's...
And beyond what's here, what are we doing about it? And not just with like diverse ideas, diverse thinking. Because I think oftentimes you stay in the diverse minds. We have diverse thinkers, but we all look the same. Okay, now how do we get diverse people? We got diverse people. Okay, but they all come in the same class structure. Okay, let's diverse. So it's how deep are we leaning into our diversity? And that's the questions that's like, what's good there? Diversity is here, but how are we diversifying truly and stepping beyond just like whether it's good or bad?
And I think one more thing, you said having the ears to listen. I just think of that stepping into the diversity and the having blind spots and then having the ears is the only way we realize all of those layers of diversity is by listening to each other and I guess trusting each other's experiences and what people share, what people say that they experience. We have to trust that because, we have blind spots. And yeah, like you said, you go, oh, we all look the same. Oh, now we look different, but we're all from the same place. Oh, we're all now from different places, but we're all from the same status economically. I think that's the only way to have that is to listen to each other and believe each other when we say, I experienced this, or a group of us experienced this.
And like that listening more. So an indigenous practice that I was exposed to is listen more than you speak, right? Yeah. When I've had the opportunity to be a part of a ceremony, is oftentimes when facilitators or speakers and healers are trying to explain, they say, listen more than you speak. Because when you listen, I'm actually listening to what you're saying. I'm not waiting to speak right after you're done. I'm taking a second and then moving from there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting living in a world that has become so polarized. I've had my own experiences with learning how to listen, and it like keeps coming back. Like listening is the greatest tool I think that we have. I find myself always reflecting on just how so many Americans, we live in this reactive culture where it's like, oh, you said this, I say this. Oh, you do this, I say, I believe this. And like, okay, like let's pause, let's listen. Because so often we see each other's beliefs, we see each other's backgrounds, we see each other's race and gender and socioeconomic status. And we see that before we see their humanity.
I thought it was one of you two that said it earlier of even with, whatever personal work we do or lessons we learn, of judging people by their beliefs before their humanity. I guess it must have been you.
Oh, it's something that I'm having to learn how to do better. I'm definitely a proponent of like the all men suck kind of phrase. I've definitely said that a lot. And it's
Yeah,
like,
they do.
No, they don't. Like, it's like I understand that like the patriarchy exists and also like not all men suck.
Well, it's still important to recognize, like, why do we have so many girls and so many women saying all men suck? Like, it might not be true. It might, like you said, it's a generalization that it's not accurately reflecting the situation. But it's a pretty big deal that's like a sentiment we all repeat and laugh about with each other. Like,
Pamphinette, you mentioned decolonization a lot. And one thing that's been working me is this thought around manifest destiny. So colonizers came in using manifest destiny in the name of God to conquer, right? And now we have all these towns and economic development, and we preach that diversity is good and we welcome diversity to come to this land. Is asking for diversity like a sugar-coated manifest destiny? Like people coming in to a land and then welcoming everyone else after they like got it.
When we talk about just colonization, or even the notion of what they call terra nullius land, that this land was empty and that we found it, we discovered it. And when we discovered it, we took it. And then we brought people to work on it. But before that land was someone's land. And even the concept of ownership, we need to unpack that already. Because like, can you own land? And I think in one of the hatch exercises, they're like, what can you own? I can't remember what the question was. It's like, what do you own or what owns you? And I was like, can you own human life? Can you own life? And when we start that, then we start moving with, okay, so land can't actually be bought, owned, because it's not ours. Because at the end of the day, if there's a hurricane that comes right now, we're kind of in a bad situation. You know what I mean? But when we start moving with the idea that by just sprinkling in diversity without, again, having a decolonial lens as to how we are engaging with this community, and that extends to not just human life, like beings, but that extends to land and resources and the ways that we engage with that. So by just giving people like, oh, just come here, we'll sell you this American dream. I'll extend that to Canada too. Like, we'll sell you this dream. You'll get land. You'll be able to live in this beautiful idea. We're not addressing the issue that what this dream was based off of was a lie. That at the inception of how we got people here, a lot of Europeans, when they came, they were granted land. You come here, you have land. You don't have to be in the turmoil and the warfare that's happening, you have land. But that was directly at the expense of indigenous bodies. And then with that was at the labor of Black bodies. So all of that is intrinsically linked with how we understand how not just diversity, but we don't want to keep recreating the same harms that got us here in the first place. But now by just sprinkling a bunch of people and be like, oh, we got diversity, let's address the root issue that like, whose lands are we on? From there, how do we engage with the community? How do we not just get the check mark, I talked to you, okay, we're good. How do I let you lead? Because you were told that your leadership was not valid. Your governance was not valid. And then start from there.
What are some examples of ways that what something would look like if it were to be decolonized?
In literally anything. So I'll give a bit of context. So I play rugby for Team Canada. And before my exposure to a lot of Indigenous people's reality, I was like waving the flag. I'm like, hey, Team Canada, you know. And then I remember I was talking to someone, actually it was Canada Day during COVID. And so there wasn't a lot of festivities. And I was listening to Indigenous people talk about how the celebration of Canada Day was a reminder of like the violence that happened in the communities. And at that point, I was like, here I am. They're like, oh, yeah, Pam, do you have something to say? And I was like, oh, it's a little awkward. So I got up there and I was like, I just felt so guilty. And yes, I'm a Black woman, but I just felt so guilty. So that guilt doesn't just limit to just like white people, because there's, poor white people and, there's so many intersections. But I felt so guilty. And I was like, what am I going to do with this guilt? I sat in it for a little bit. And I was like, okay, what do I do? So that meant listening. I attended every single rally I could. I read as many books. I met Nikki, who's the founder of Decolonize Together, and I learned from her. And so with that, I was like, okay, the Olympics is a pretty big deal. Got a lot of people watching. Cool. And I'm also going to be representing Canada. How do I make sure that when we're there, I'm also not just taking what I heard and leaving it as something that was in my ear and out the other, but I'm taking that with me with now that responsibility that I've been exposed to. So what we did is at the Olympics, we made sure to wear orange. And orange is a color. So today, actually, September 30th is the day to bring awareness to a lot of like Indigenous peoples, particularly in Canada, or what we call Canada today, about the hardships that's going on, and particularly speaking to the genocide of Indigenous children that were murdered in residential schools. And so for me, I thought it was important that if I'm going to go to represent Canada, I need to make sure I'm also showing the voices of our Indigenous people. So we had orange scrunchies, shoelaces, like our tape, everything was orange. Whenever because it was COVID, so we had face masks, and we had a face mask that said, "Every child matters." And to every airtime, you couldn't unsee the message. Mm-hmm. You couldn't unsee Indigenous people and people of color. And also the people wearing it, white people with different types of lived experience. And showing that like when it comes to decolonization, it's not easy, but the way that we can weave it into how we move in life, whether on the national team to whether you're supporting someone on the streets, it can be done literally everywhere and should be done everywhere. So then it's inclusive. If I'm thinking about beyond myself, that's inclusive. Mm-hmm. And we're starting in the right direction to, at least for you to matter, I need to see you first. Mm-hmm. So let you be seen and move from there.
So as we're in this week of sustainable development goals and all these thousands of projects within each goal, there's all these tension points of how we get there, right? There's all these different cultures and different philosophies and different religions kind of influencing all of this. Whose reality do you think will win the future?
Let's ask the next gen.
I don't think it's a competition. Like asking whose reality will win the future. Like the reality that we live in a world that is diverse, like that's what's going to win. I think the moment we make something a competition, it totally goes back to colonial roots. Mm-hmm. And instead, like stripping that away and recognizing like, wait, like it's not a competition. We can all be different and still be equal.
Mm-hmm. Whose vision or whose reality will win the future? I think it's this reality that I'm sitting in a room with like 3 people I just met at an experience designed to share ideas and collaborate and build on ideas that are started with this idea of inclusiveness and innovation and care for each other and for the planet. So yeah, I was going to say this reality, if we can get this reality, and again, I take it back to education just because I've been participating in a lab that's working on redesigning it. If we can, sidetrack. I talk about kids these days and the access to the internet, and it comes with plenty of ups and plenty of downs. But one of them is I think these kids, I'm a kid, we're developing a shared reality in a way, in that the shared reality is that we can all hear each other within seconds. We can all see each other within seconds. We can hear ideas. We can make things popular, and we can develop possibly negative things like cancel culture and stuff like that. But just this shared ideology of that we can all see each other's dreams and we can all hear each other's realities. Yeah, and just that, where we've talked about what diversity looks like and what inclusiveness looks like. And it looks like that. It looks like ability to see each other's reality without necessarily, and I guess I would hope this would be the case in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later, without needing to really force these spaces open, because ideally no one would be excluded in the first place, of where we naturally let the flow of relationships and communication and inclusivity and participation and opportunity. That natural flow is all an intermingling of people with different experiences and backgrounds and histories. So I think that kind of sidetracked there, but I think that reality is what we're all seeing here is the reality that's going to win. That shared knowledge and that we don't know everything, but we would like to hear it from everyone.
It comes back to this like understanding of equity, this paradigm that if someone isn't thriving, no one is thriving. We cannot succeed, move forward, grow until everyone has the ability to. In that vein, when someone isn't thriving, we're all losing. We're all at a disadvantage. I think it's been really interesting being in an educational setting in which we're trying to adopt an equity policy, and so much of the response has been, well, competition is the way the world works, and some people are just meant to do better than other people. And it's like, whoa, wait, no.
Well, how do you feel about that as an Olympian?
Hey, I obviously really like competition, but I also see that the harms of it too. I'm competing, but I'm having a difficult time being vulnerable, right? So it's like, okay, we got a winner, but how's that winner feeling when they got there?
Yeah.
And we're seeing that a lot with a lot of Olympians. Yes, you got a gold medal, the hype is there, but their mental health is like not okay. Whether you're on the winning side or if you lost too. So like, I think beyond the competition, which again is a symptom of white supremacy culture and perfectionism and elitism and all these things, is that when we stay in competition, it exposes a lot of things that leaves us into isolating situations. But as much as I love competition, I'm also trying to figure out ways that we can decolonize it in a way that like I can love my sport, have an opponent, but also make sure my opponent is good after. Yeah. And so when we were saying like our liberation is tied, and in the educational lab when we were saying that when we center the voice of those that are oftentimes overshadowed, so like let's say particularly with the students, if the student is good, we need the teachers to be good.
Yeah.
When the teachers are good, the institution is good, the high school is good, and that domino effect. But we have to make sure that we center it at the heart of who are we trying to service? Who are we trying to influence? And so for us, like as an athlete, I feel most empowered to think about these things, about competition, because I'm the one competing. And so now I understand the mechanisms of how do I compete, play, but make sure we're all okay when we're doing it.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of along the same lines as a ballet dancer is, we strive for this perfection that we never reach, but I mean, part of the joy is striving for it. So I was like, I kind of like competition. But what I think it comes down to is the resources and the opportunities must be shared and they must be equal. And again, I keep going back to words that people have said earlier in the day. Someone said, you're the only you, but you're not the only person like you. So that I think that just kind of leaves room for, yes, people will excel at different levels and different rates, and success looks different for everybody. But we're all sharing this world. We're all sharing these systems and sharing them rather unequally currently. So if we all have those resources and those opportunities, so we can all start from the same base and we can build that base together. From there, we can grow into the diverse world of potential and exploration that we love to imagine and we love to participate in now, but is not reaching its potential as a system because we've been saying, it lacks that representation, lacks that diversity.
We need urgent change, right? Is that like the riff that we're all getting this week? Would you rather wait for the pace of democracy or have a dictator for the day?
I would never want to be a dictator because I think it goes back to, I think democracy needs to evolve and change, but I think being a dictator is the most colonial-esque thing you can do because it's now I have all the power and I get to make decisions for everyone.
But is it like fast enough? Waiting on democracy to change, is that fast enough?
I think democracy is a really slow process, and I think it was built in a way to be slow. And I think there's benefits and there's drawbacks, but I would much rather trust the process of democracy.
Pro-democracy.
I would almost argue like how we even view our current democracy is who's dictating it. Like even bringing that out of that is like, right now, we're not the ones. I mean, I know I'm not the one. And a lot of people that look like me are not the ones dictating our reality.
Yeah.
So, like, have we even seen the true potential of democracy? Have we even, like, reimagined what that could look like? So even when we talk about, like, dictatorship, I mean, I know I'm not dictating it. So what do we have right now?
True. And I think that, like, it goes back to what we were talking about is, like, the only way that we are able to build a system that works for everyone is if everyone is reflected in that system.
I love hearing your thoughts, and I agree with all of your thoughts. That being said, earlier when Tate asked me this question, I said I would choose to be a dictator for a day. But I think that was certainly more a reaction to it being a thought experiment than it being a reality. And I agree ultimately that I think, trusting the process is the way to do it. And I think what you bring to the table is so important too, of like, have we seen the full potential of democracy? And I don't think we haven't. But my answer was still birthed from that sense of urgency to just fix things. Mm-hmm. But then again, I don't know how to fix things. Although I would love to be there, it has to be a group effort, and an inclusive group effort. And again, I'm thinking back to, is actually interesting. In my IB Theory of Knowledge class last week, we were talking about the benefits of dictatorships versus democracies. And one of the things we pointed out, which may seem evident but applies to this question, is you never choose who the dictator is. You don't get to choose who's on top, and that comes back to what you said, Pamphinette, as well, of you never know who's on top, and often the people who want power aren't the ones the people would like in power, and the people who don't want power are the ones that really can visualize and want this change. So,
And I think our democracy is just set up in a way where the people within this country have so little trust in especially our legislative branch, and especially the House, but somehow 90% of people that are elected continue to be reelected. Mm-hmm. And it's like, why? It's because they have money. It's because they have power. And our government is based on this principle that money and power gets you somewhere. And I think that money and power puts within our government and that sentiment that is necessary for us to move forward. Like, my words are not working, but
they're very powerful words for someone who's suing the governor.
We need to recognize that our structure of democracy prioritizes wealthy individuals to remain in power. And those people stay in power for decades. Like, there are no term limits in Congress. What does that do? Like, that creates people that are disconnected from the reality of our country. And it doesn't invite in a government that represents everyone and a government that is rooted in equity instead of elitism.
What brings you hope?
For me, what brings me hope is you guys. You guys are really, really cool. I
have like a major girl crush on Pamphinette.
I've been fangirling ever since I even heard that she was here.
I just think that the way that we can lean into what's being said by those that are going to be existing beyond us is like where we need to be.
It brings me hope when individuals recognize, I think the worst thing we can do is be apathetic. Mm-hmm. Because that's like giving up. Like, there's no point. If we're apathetic, nothing will ever get done. And the moment we say, hey, let's take a leap, like, let's run and jump and leap forward together, like, that gives me hope.
Yeah, on that note, on the anger I've been discussing, it's come up with some people. Someone mentioned that they think high schoolers are pretty cynical, and they said it's not in a bad way. They said that was the reason they think that we're going to be the ones to change the world, and they said that wasn't to dump all of the world's problems on us. But I agree with them. I think there is a certain cynicism in teenagers today. But that cynicism, what it really is the grit to really say, we're fucking changing the world, because this has gone on long enough. And we're gonna talk to each other, and we're gonna collaborate, and we're gonna get in your faces about it, and we're gonna make change.
Well, I'm Tate Chamberlin. This is the I Am Interchange podcast, and we're up at the HATCH Summit this week in Paradise Valley. Pamphinette, Olivia, and Ruby, thank you so much for being here. It was a great late night chat with you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Apathy, not resistance, is the arguable enemy of change. In this, there's hope. As forthcoming generations graduate high school, begin college educations, travel, enter the workforce, engage in politics, and advocate change, they define a new vernacular for the future and an honest incarnation of democracy. In this new iteration, everyone has a seat at the table. Those who have been hushed are given microphones, and those who have led are invited to listen. New solutions are imagined and reimagined in world-spanning collaborative think tanks. New voices answer colonialist paradigms with concepts in communion with the roots of this country, of humanity. And with them comes change, as indignant as it is innovative to the systems that no longer serve. A shout out to our media and production team: Jessica Byerly, Allison Gregory, Kevin Hilton, Roy Chapman, Eli Kisko, Raymond Onsatagi, Sean Mackinson, Robert Edwards, and Mark Groner. A special thanks to Yarrow Craner, Jared Silverman, Pete Strom, Josie Caton, Eitan Shapira, Cassidy Seckman, Bryant Stersala, Rachel Hicks, Katie Yam, and Lou Morris. With so much gratitude to the Hatch supporters, Steelcase, the Kauffman Foundation, the Gwydion Fund, Envision Equality, the Hatch volunteers, board of directors, Hatch guardians, and the community who help make this work and mission possible. To learn more about Hatch, visit hatchexperience.org. Building community could not happen without food. And with that, I'd like to thank Whistle Pig Korean, Red Tractor Pizza, and Zocalo Coffee House. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.